All right, well, we're a minute past the hour now, so we'll get going. Hopefully we've got a few folks trickling in, and for those of you I have not met yet, good day, everybody. And my name is Rob Hewitt, and I'm the Director of Global Business Development for Spatial DNA. Here at Spatial DNA, we design and build no-code integrations to connect solutions to your key business applications. Some quick background on our company. We've been around for 12 years, and we started as a system design company in the aviation sector. We built our practice around mission-critical systems, and this meant the design must not fail. We took this experience to the local government space, which is where we do most of our work now. We continue to expand our work in aviation and other industries like retail, manufacturing, and real property. We now focus primarily on application integration. Our product is a no-code platform that understands spatial information. This is very important if you're in an industry that needs to leverage geographical data or an industry that manages or builds facility infrastructure assets. We've handled some complex integration challenges, and we understand that data is never perfect, and we can always design around any data deficiencies. Your host for today's webinar will be our founder and CEO, Todd Lewis. Todd is on a mission to connect systems, transform work, and engage the creativity of his customers so that they can grow their communities by digitally transforming their businesses. Todd has been active in the GIS technology space for 25 years and is a recognized expert in application and data integration. Todd holds a BSc in geomatics engineering from the University of Calgary, and he is an active member of the Entrepreneur Organization, a group that's dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs and growing the entrepreneurial spirit globally. Over to you, Todd.
Hey, thanks, Rob. So today we're going to be talking about master data management. You'll learn about what a master data management program is, what purpose it serves in your organization. We'll touch on how to determine what business objects should be considered master data. Then we'll discuss how you can get a master data management program started in your organization and what it takes for your program to be successful and serve its purpose. Finally, we'll talk about who in your organization should be on your MDM team. So first of all, what is master data management? It's kind of a mouthful, so we also like to call it just MDM. Master data management, or MDM, is the practice of cleansing, rationalizing, and integrating data into an enterprise-wide system of record for core business activities. Many organizations use multiple applications that independently manage some or all of a particular business object, an address or a service or an employee or a customer, for example. In the diagram below, application A is managing service, address, employee, and business unit, while application B is also managing service address information, and additionally, some information about facilities and vendors. The issue is that if the service or address refers to the same person, there can be data consistency issues across systems. So if you're delivering a service A to address A and service B is also delivering to the same address, is the information current? We may have multiple versions of the same business object. There could be a different definition or structure, maybe different maintenance policies are applied. The same record in each system may have alternate spellings or even alternate representations. So Bill versus William, referring to the same person, for example. Privacy may be a consideration for some of the data in one system or in the other, and each system may carry different attributes for the same record. So fragmented data. So to put it in context, questions and inconsistencies can result in fragmented data. When these inconsistencies are multiplied across many systems, the scale of the problem is vast. When major decisions are being based on this data, inaccuracy is simply not an option. Master data management works to eliminate duplication and inconsistencies and commonly used business data, giving all staff a trusted single source of truth. Master data management is the solution to this problem. So MDM involves using a combination of practices and technologies across an organization to maintain consistent, accurate, and reliable core business data. Your organization may require fundamental changes in its business processes to maintain clean master data. Issues are often more often interpersonal and political rather than technical. So once you've identified the issues and defined processes, your organization can implement technical tools to facilitate these processes. An NDM program involves creating and maintaining master data. You'll need tools and processes as your master data expands and is updated over time. Master data is essential data around which your business is conducted. This data changes infrequently. So for example, a customer's address may need to be changed if they move, but for most transactions, that customer information will remain the same. We often split master data into various categories, into major domains. And these domains are major components of what you make or deliver, to whom you deliver, and where delivery occurs. So typically domains include customers, products and services, locations, and other information. So for customers, if you think about each business unit in your organization and who they deal with external to them, it may be suppliers, it may be customers. Some of those interactions may be internally facing, so employees and other people like that. Products and services are provided to customers, citizens, businesses, and visitors. So this domain organizes what you make or deliver to your customers. It may include the breakdown of products into parts and materials, or services into their constituent parts, including service delivery. You can start to think of the locations you deliver your products or services from, such as agencies, branches, facilities, and these can also be broken down into subparts. So you can take a facility and break that down into floors and rooms. Government bodies that encompass a geographic territory, or a manufacturer with a large territory, or some other infrastructure organization, may also consider all properties and rights of way that are forming that territory. And geographic divisions representing service areas, electoral geographies, and transit routes, which may be service delivery, can be part of that location information. Other information includes your contracts, your programs, major business initiatives that you might be going after, and regulations supporting some of those services. So how do we determine what qualifies as master data? We look at 8 dimensions of categorization of that data to identify what is or isn't considered master data. The first one we look at is behavior information. So this describes how data interacts with other data. It's often a noun and a verb relationship between master data and transactional data. So for example, a customer buys a product. When you go onto Amazon to buy something, you're logging into your customer profile. So Amazon knows you're a customer. You buy a product, which Amazon represents as a product catalog to select from. Amazon records your purchase as a transaction that links these 2 master data elements, you, the customer, and what you bought, the product. Lifecycle is another dimension we look at. So a data lifecycle considers the creation, read, update, and deletion of data, CRUD for short. And potentially, we also look at searching for data to explore, and by exploring some of the metadata to relate it. The important thing to note about lifecycle is that there's a formal business process that's supporting the creation, update, and deletion of data. Adding a new customer often means setting up an account or a profile. It's a business process to capture information about a new customer and potentially linking that profile to other data. So in a municipal website, this might mean you log in as a customer and you want to connect to your water bill account. So you provide some information to connect that water account information to your customer profile. Cardinality, so here you're counting the number of data elements, the number of records related to a particular business entity. So typically the more items that you're managing, the more important the data. For customer data, if you have 3 records, it may be valuable, but not really that important to consider as master data. But if you have tens of thousands or more of customer records, this increases the importance of that data. Master data tends to be less volatile. So we look at the lifetime. It only changes occasionally and through a well-regulated process. We often think of this as a slowly changing dimension. So consider a contract as an example. It may have either a long or a short lifespan. If you have something like a supply arrangement that you might hold with 3 or 4 or 5 vendors across multiple years, the supply arrangement itself, the type of contract, may be considered master data, whereas each task authorization or short-term contracts that are let against that supply arrangement may be considered transactions against the supply arrangement. You can consider complexity by looking at simple things. If a local government distributes a lot of water, makes money distributing that water, so the water is valuable. However, considering each cubic meter of water as master data isn't really a challenge to manage. You just need to count the volume delivered. So the water by meter may not be master data. We tend to look at things that have relationships with other information, have extended attributes, and be more complex to manage. Value. So if a data element has value, it is more likely to be considered master data. And you might also want to look at the corollary. What is the impact to your organization of having incorrect information, right? So the information may be valuable in that if it's wrong, it has a large impact on the organization. So if you have the wrong street address associated with a property owner and your municipality, and you want to notify that owner that they may not have access to their property due to emergency water repairs, you might be upset and complain if you actually send that notification to the wrong address. So value and complexity of the information as well are often correlated. Master data changes slowly over time as compared to transactional data. However, entities whose attributes never change are not typically considered master data. So if you have, for example, a rare coin collection or a stamp collection, you might store information in a database about each coin or each stamp. You may add new coins or stamps to your collection, but you're never going to change the attribute values in your database for coins or stamps that you already own. Reuse. If a business object is widely used across your organization, reusing a standardized version of the information has a high return on the cost of the formal maintenance that you'll be doing through these MDM practices. So reuse is one of those primary drivers of guiding your master data program. How can you start an MDM program? So we start with an initial project. There are 4 major activities involved in starting up and maintaining an MDM program. You're going to plan and analyze, set up governance, select and configure technology, and then finally build and manage your master data. So as with any successful initiative, it's important that we start small and win big. Demonstrating success after success makes it easier to invite stakeholders into the conversation, get them engaged. Answering the questions, what's in it for me, what's in it for us, are equally important. The first major group of activities, as in any project, is the planning and the analysis. What does the current situation look like? In your analysis, you'll be looking at the potential sources of master data and considering the following. So identifying those sources, identifying the producers and consumers of master data, and then collecting and analyzing metadata for each master data object that you've identified. So identifying sources, which systems across your organization have master data. And often when you're talking to stakeholders or a larger group, it becomes immediately apparent where they're having issues with certain types of information, whether that's employees or your organization structure, or perhaps it's definitions of what services that you're delivering to multiple users or groups of people. If we split those sources of data, of master data, into producers and consumers, we can then start to look at which applications are creating and updating master data. And this is where we're going to want to start looking at that create and update process, lifecycle management of that information, and which systems are consumers of that data. So which systems will be reading or searching for those master data records. We then collect and analyze all of the metadata around what we've identified as master data. So including attribute names and data types, what kind of values are allowed, any constraints on those values, any default values, dependencies with other kind of information that we might have to support as well as part of that master list. And then looking at who owns the definition and maintenance of the data. And of course, at the start, looking at these producer systems, there are multiple people that are contributing towards that definition and part of the maintenance. One of them, or possibly some other group in your organization, may be identified as the group that should own that definition. So that leads us to the next point around setting up governance. So master data management is a strategic program with a heavy emphasis on governance. Remember, changing master data typically involves a formal business process. So likewise, there is oversight in the definition and curation of master data. We look at setting up governance by appointing data stewards. So these are people with knowledge of the current source data, and they are appointed by owners of each master data source and are the architects responsible for putting together how that data is structured and maintained. They're often business users of that master data themselves. The other aspect is creating a data governance council. So this group has knowledge and authority to make decisions on how the master data is maintained, how long it's kept, how changes are made, so that formal change management process. And they also have a well-defined decision-making process, which is really important for success of the project. There's hundreds of decisions to make as you're implementing and setting up your MDM process, and politics can get in the way without an effective decision-making process. The next step is selecting and configuring technology. So this considers the data model, how you're going to structure your master data in terms of a physical implementation, what information is contained in that model, and looking at the software and supporting tools. So choosing a tool set for connecting those systems and cleaning data. And then finally looking at that scalable technology infrastructure to ensure availability of that master data for the organization. So first, developing that master data model. One, we're looking at all of those attributes, data types, values, constraints, and whatnot that we've collected in that analysis stage from various source systems, as well as the various consumer systems, and trying to identify what subset of that information represents master information. Then we look at that data mapping between master record, what that master record looks like in current data sources, and build out a data model structure to hold that master data. Second, choosing a tool set. And so there's a few tools that are really important for managing master data. One, we need to be able to incorporate new information into your master data list, often from your producer systems. So you need tools to clean and merge that master data. And there's different techniques per domain. So if you're looking at customer data, there might be some tools that look at, that have capabilities for replacing various values around customer names and having multiple alternative names for different customers around standardizing address information, profiling phone numbers, etc. There should also be some tools for fixing data quality issues, as well as managing versions and hierarchies. So some master data is configured in a hierarchical form. So if we have organizations, for example, you have business units that may roll up into larger groups or departments, that. So there's an organizational structure, and your tool should be able to support understanding the links across that organizational structure. And the last step is designing the infrastructure. So there's going to be a lot of applications that are going to be feeding information into your master data list, as well as viewing or extracting information from that. So this is something that needs to be on all the time. It needs to scale as you're adding applications that are going to be using that data, and it has to have some resilience. So if part of the infrastructure fails for any reason, a server goes down or a service isn't available, there needs to be a backup or a way for your infrastructure to fill in that blank while that service rebooting, so that the data is always available. The last step is building and managing your master data. So here you're going to generate and test your master data. You may modify your producing and consuming systems to update the data or automate the data change process for local copies. And you'll also need to implement maintenance processes for continuous improvement to data quality and to maintain your data accuracy. So when we look at generating and testing master data, first thing we're looking at is pulling all that source information together into that master data model, into a master list. And 100% match isn't going to be possible. We're not going to be able to transpose all of that information exactly into your master data model. So your data stewards are going to be the ones that are going to help to correct any mismatches or to correctly match items, as well as merge any deficiencies across your various source systems. Modifying the producing and consuming systems. So depending on the implementation pattern of master data management that's chosen, so this could be having a hub system where you're storing all of the master data in a central repository. Applications are contributing data there, and consuming applications are reading data from the master repository, often through an API or an application interface of some sort. You could have a data virtualization implementation pattern, which is really just pointing at where various parts of that master list, the various attributes and entities that are composing that master data live. So you're actually hitting against various source systems to compile essentially a virtual record. So depending on the implementation pattern, you may have to adjust how those source systems are structured, how the information is fed and consumed by those consuming systems. And remember that we're putting in formalized processes for creation and update of that master data. Lastly, in implementing maintenance processes. So the data steward is responsible for maintaining the quality of that master data. So he needs a set of tools to be available to detect inconsistencies. So things like duplications or mismatches of data. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Rob now for a brief survey.
Well, thanks very much, Todd. Just before I launch the survey there, I thought I'd comment on everybody having to hire somebody by the name of Dieter Stewart to handle. All right, full time, everyone. At Spatial DNA, we're always thinking about what makes our customers tick. What do they prefer day to day? Do they like older, tried, tested, and true designs, or is there an appetite for solving problems with an evolved, more progressive approach? This leads us to our poll question. Do you prefer the original square design of Shreddy's cereal, or do you prefer the new and improved diamond design? Please feel free to drop your answer in the chat. We look forward to analyzing the results. Todd, I think everyone has had a good break and we're ready to get back into the MDM presentation. Back over to you.
I didn't realize we're doing product placements, Rob. Thanks for the fun reset. So what makes a master data management program successful? Categorizing activity makes things both easier to explain and gives us a framework to guide us through a process. There's 6 disciplines for a strong MDM program: governance, measurement, organization, policy, process, and technology. we look at the first discipline around governance, forms a key part of MDM, any MDM program. So a team curated from across the organization with various points of view or perspective defines and oversees various aspects of your MDM program. Measurement looks at how you're doing against your goals. So any business activity requires measurement to ensure that you have the resources to achieve your goals and to measure progress along the way. So measurement for an MDM program really looks at the data quality and your continuous improvement processes to judge performance. Getting the right people in the right place, data stewards, data owners, governance participants, you need to get the right people in the right seats in the bus. You'll need to draw from your key business people across the organization that bridge business and technical knowledge about your master data. And these are your data stewards. Data owners are key stakeholders, as are participants in your governance activities that are helping to set the direction for management and maintenance of your master data. The requirements, policies, and standards which your master data management program should adhere help to define how some of this is measured. And policy often bridges those gaps between what is technically possible to implement and what needs to be done with the information. So in some of our activities around designing master data management, we can create a great model to store all sorts of information, but there might be questions around things like if we have customer data, what do we do about consent? Well, we can store consent, but it's a policy to understand whether consent has been asked for, provided, and is checked and updated on a regular basis. Processes are defined across the data life cycle, the CRUD cycle, that are used to manage master data. So remember that changes and access to your master data is governed by formal business processes. So you need to be able to wrap those processes around that data lifecycle. Technology is a key enabler of any MDM program. The master data hub or data virtualization or registry, whatever implementation approach you take, helps you to organize your master data, contains some tools for cleaning, matching, and merging, as well as tools to identify and correct inconsistencies. Technology also includes the data load transform tools and the application integration tools to interface with your producer and consumer systems. There is no exhaustive list of who should be involved in your master data program as stakeholders, but there are three key roles that are critical to the success of a program. There's administrators, there's the data governance council, and then there's data stewards. So administrators are your technologists, typically working on your IT or IT support teams that are responsible for setting up and administering the master data, and then supporting the technology solution and infrastructure. People on your data governance council are helping to drive your definitions and requirements around master data. They identify the master data list, and they also provide feedback and direction relating to data quality and continuous improvement of master data. And finally, data stewards are responsible for fixing, cleaning, and managing the data in the MDM solution once it's available or loaded from source systems. So data stewards, or as Rob likes to call them, Dieter Stewart, are ideally technically oriented. They don't have to be adept from each department where source systems are identified. Their activities are generally defined by the data governance team. So I'm going to hand the mic back to Rob before we open the floor for questions.
Well, thanks very much, Todd. Lots of great information in there. I did not realize CRUD was involved in this world. I thought of that as something that you might find on your shoe after a walk through the park. But thanks very much, very informative. If anyone here today is looking to get some further advice and support to start an MDM program in your organization, Spatial DNA provides consultation in the form of master data management framework. This involves defining and socializing new master data, such as employees, customers, services, assets, and coming to agreement on first project initiatives. Your first master data object will help to define a conceptual data model. We'll work with your stakeholders to ensure their use cases are covered and deliver a logical data model that can be implemented in a technology solution. We also build an API specification to formalize and create an update process. So please feel free to give us a call or email if your organization needs some expert guidance in this area. On to question time. Please feel free to raise your digital hand or wave your real hand and hop on camera to ask live, or simply put your questions in the chat and I'll read them out for Todd. Thanks again, everybody. All right, Todd, I'll get you started with one here. Do you have recommendations for best practice master data sets?
Yeah, so a lot of the master data that we tend to deal with right now, or those first programs, involve sort of key items that are used across the organization. So employees are one, customers, the organization services that are being delivered, and then more and more in city government, we're also seeing assets being like infrastructure assets or mobile assets or whatnot across the organization being flagged as potential master data as well.
Okay, thank you. What risks
That's
are
pretty
involved?
funny, Nathan.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think maybe they tricked us with that one. Todd, what risks are involved?
In a master data program, I guess like any other sort of enterprise level program or strategic program, there's a risk of getting lost in the details, not having the right people at the start of the program, not having a good sponsor that's able to really drive collaboration across the organization can be a problem to getting an MDM program off the ground. So really having that the right person that's driving for this program, and those first selecting that first project. What's the best first project that's going to drive engagement across the organization? Because engagement and collaboration is really important around master data. So having something in terms of the topic as well as the person driving the program is really important.
Thank you, Todd. And a question from Mr. Louis. How do you work around a canonical model where each group is fighting to name fields? And for example, address versus ADDR versus ADDRS.
Yeah, so the nice thing about working in a, I guess what we call a system independent model is you can be a little bit more descriptive as to what those data fields actually are. You can give them a full name or an extended full name, as well as more of a description. And then the mapping exercise, the data mapping exercise, can help you to look at how do you move that longer description into a system that may only be able to handle that as an abbreviation or a shorter name. So, you know, when each group is fighting to name fields, this is where the politics comes in. Really a decision-making process is part of how to handle those kinds of conflicts. And often there might be an override from whoever is providing sort of that key source information as to what it's called as well. Did that help, Herman?
Okay, on to one last question here, Todd, and then I think we can give some time back to everybody today as we're 2:36 Eastern, so another couple of minutes to answer this question, and then we can wrap up. Is master data a shared responsibility that no department owns? And what happens if one department spearheads it and wants people to conform?
Yeah, so this is a corporate, if you want to think about it as a corporate or an organization-wide objective. Often it is asked for, if you will, by one group in the organization. Often that's finance, to try to get some commonality on some of the compliance and financial reporting required that roll up to various objects. So information about customers, about employees, about services delivered, a lot of that ends up rolling up into the finance side. So often they're leading or requesting an organization-wide sort of master data program. The concern from other groups, of course, is having to conform to a set of standards derived for one purpose around financial reporting. So it's really important to set up that governance council with participants from across the organization, not just the one group that may be driving for conformance of their particular business activity. And that can offset the sort of the sway or the impetus for conforming to one standard. Master data management program is collaborative. It is important to have a data owner that's responsible for each object in the master data list. So that ownership is really critical to identify. And it may not be in the organization that's driving adoption of a standard for that particular data object. Hopefully that kind of answers that question.
Yes, thank you, Todd. And thanks for joining us today. Herman, Nathan, you're the last that hung on, so I'll make that Dieter Stewart joke once more. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again at one of our future events.